Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies, and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur Podcast. And I am joined today by the fabulous Charlotte Humphries, who is a graphic designer and social media manager. And in today's episode, we are going to be looking at how branding can impact your business success. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, my lovely. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited to come on.
I'm really, really excited to dive into all things branding today because I feel like branding is such an important part of building any business, especially if people are building a personal brand where they really want to stand out. But we're going to dive into everything in this episode. Charlotte, before we start looking at branding, could you just give a proper introduction to yourself, to our listeners, and tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, of course. So I've basically always loved all things design, all things being creative. I studied graphic design and fine art at college, so I did all the qualifications and everything, which was amazing. Unfortunately, when I first left college, I couldn't go into graphic design. I had to just get a normal job or whatever I could. So I worked in shipping for a while, but I just knew deep down it just wasn't for me. I just wanted to do what I enjoyed, because at the end of the day, you're working most of your life. So in the end, I went back and studied further, and I then started my career as a graphic designer about 5.5 years ago now, which has absolutely flown by, and I've absolutely loved every minute of it. At the moment, I'm currently working full-time at a marketing agency, and then I'm growing my business as well in my own time, as a graphic designer and social media manager. And it's amazing, and I love working with some wonderful clients. And yeah, I'm just so excited to see how everything goes.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love the fact that you're obviously following your dream and using your passion to turn that into something, ultimately to support other people and help other people in terms of their businesses. So I love that. So thank you for sharing. So let's dive into branding because, like I said, I'm really excited to dive into this topic. I think it's such an important part of any business. So why is branding essential for female entrepreneurs, and how does it actually set them apart within their own industries, would you say?
So I'd say branding is really essential when you're setting up your business, or even like if you're halfway through your business journey, because essentially your branding is the difference between you becoming a recognizable business that people know and trust, or the difference between you kind of not becoming that. So if you don't have a decent brand that people can recognize and get to know, then it will prevent you from showing up as the authority or the professional figure in your industry. So it's the key first impression that people will make of you. So if you think about it, when you're essentially judging a book by its cover, that's exactly how branding works. So your brand will not only create the first impression that people make, but it will also create the long-lasting impressions people make. And that will continue to grow as your business grows, evolves, and adapts. So essentially, with branding, it's going to be everywhere, and you want people to have a good interpretation of you so that they will want to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. And you know, it's really interesting you said in terms of judging, a book like like its cover in a sense. And we always say to ourselves, we shouldn't do that. But actually, we do. And when we look at brands, when we look at, anything, whether it's clothing, whether it's makeup, whether it's something to do with beauty, whether it's something completely different, if you're investing in a coach or something, you're always going to look, first of all, at their first impressions is their branding, how they're presenting themselves, especially across social media. I think that's it plays a massive part of it, which I'm sure we'll dive into soon. But even for me, I think when I started my business, one of the first things I did before anything else was to book myself a photographer. So I had professional photos and videos to support me with my branding, and also get my logo designed as well. So for me, that was one of the first things I thought of before I even had, a product suite or a real business model built. And I'm sure there's other people listening who are probably thinking the same and doing the same things. So obviously you've said there that it's really, really important. It's essential to really make them stand out. And as all of our listeners know, I am a massive believer that to be successful in the online space, you have to be iconic, you have to stand out, you have to be the person that basically makes waves and allows people to see that you are the go-to person. And I think branding can really support that. So how would you say then that a strong brand can help female entrepreneurs build trust and credibility with their target audience?
So I'd say that by having a strong brand, it means that you can showcase your core values as an entrepreneur, and kind of people can establish who you are and what type of business you have. So by having a strong brand and maintaining consistency with how you're showing up on all your marketing, your social media, your, everything that you're putting out there, it creates and highlights you as being the expert in your field. And it also creates that familiarity that people will have. So by therefore showing up with your core values, with keeping everything consistent, it will enable your ideal clients to trust you and for them to recognize you with any piece of content that you create. And it means that even if you're putting something out that doesn't have your logo on there, people will still recognize that it's you. That's how you know you've really kind of gained that expertise and that people trust you and can see that you're credible.
Absolutely. I love this. Building that trust, building that credibility. And I think trust is so important, isn't it? Like you mentioned there, but trust is so important. I think if you want someone to invest in you or to buy from you, regardless of whether you're a product-based business or a service provider or a coach, you have to build that trust. And branding does go a long way with supporting you with that. And that consistency, I think that consistency in your branding is really, really key. So if they're building their trust and they're starting to build that credibility, I'm assuming, and I know this anyway, but this is going to obviously support them in growing their business and making more sales. But in what ways would you say can really help female entrepreneurs leverage their branding so they can boost those sales and boost that business growth?
So it kind of does relate back to the previous points we discussed about, the overall impression of you and obviously getting that recognition. But obviously with your branding, the way you put yourself out there and look can affect whether or not you're attracting your ideal clients, because if they resonate with the look and feel of your brand, they're more likely to work with you and they're more likely to use your service. So if they're drawn to you and they're drawn to your marketing with your message, with your photos, with your colors and your consistency, they're more likely to trust you and make that sale, essentially. So your branding should align with your business, your goals, your values, and all of those as a combination will invite people to work with you. So I've had this with a recent client of mine, actually, and she won't mind me saying this, but she's essentially a therapist, for example, or she's setting up a therapy business. And obviously, if you're working in wellness and therapy, you typically want your branding to be quite calm, maybe natural, muted down colors, so that you can create a safe space for people to interact and open up with you. And obviously, if you're potentially instead going down a bright clashing route, people are less likely to do that. So what you need to think about when you're creating your brand is not only how does it represent you and your values, but also what elements of this is going to attract people to work with you. And it just all goes back to that. So obviously creating for a therapist a calm, relaxing brand, people are going to be like, oh yeah, I can trust her because she seems professional, she seems relaxed, and I'm going to open up with her and I'll be able to feel vulnerable in a safe space. So it also brings us on to kind of the trust and loyalty factor. So the more that people obviously recognize your brand, see you popping up everywhere, they'll start to trust you in your business. And essentially, the more sales you're going to make, the more people trust you, the more they resonate with your values, the more sales you'll make. So that's how you can leverage your brand for sales.
I love this. Absolutely love this. For those of you that are listening, really start to think about what branding are you using? Does your brand stand out? Does it really support you in building that trust and leveraging your brand to boost those sales and boost that growth? And I'm absolutely loving some of this advice that you're giving us, Charlotte. So thank you. But let's dive into mistakes, because I always find this fascinating when I bring on any guests onto the podcast and we dive into your zone of genius, your expertise, and we look at the mistakes that people make. So what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making when it comes to branding?
This is great. I absolutely love this question because I see so many people making these mistakes that I'm going to mention, and it does kind of make you want to cry inside. But I'll delve into what they are anyway. So the main mistake that I see people make is DIY branding. You know, they do it themselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, like they use a tool like Canva, which don't get me wrong, like Canva can be great for making, you know, social
Social media
graphics,
posts. Yeah.
ebooks, yeah, things like that. But the thing that I always go back to is that your branding should be specific to you. If you're taking an example from Canva and then just maybe changing that slightly, the chances are someone else has done the exact same thing. So how is your branding going to differentiate from someone else? And then how can you expect someone to trust you and follow you if your branding isn't bespoke?
Yes.
So if you're creating a DIY logo as well, the chances are that the quality of this isn't that great. If you're not understanding how to ensure that graphics are vector-based and of a high resolution, when you go to use your branding on any form of print-based materials, any kind of large artwork, if you've got a shop window, anything like that, it's going to really affect the quality. So it will look blurry and it just won't look professional, which again isn't going to make people want to buy from you at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the final mistake that I often see people make is basically just being inconsistent, which I think, to be honest, is something that you can actually control quite easily. Yeah. So you can control this through your colors, your fonts, and just making sure that anything that you're putting out kind of replicates this theme so that people can, as you say, recognize that it's you without your logo on there. They say, oh, okay, like for example, with your brand, you know, I see a light pink post. I think, well, obviously that's Kayleigh, you know, and with my brand, obviously I'm a little bit more colorful, but that's the representation of who we are and how we want to be seen. So, you know, making sure that you're consistent with all the content that you're putting out, it will make people again build trust with you, get to know you, and yeah, just want to work with you really. So I'd say that's definitely a mistake that people need to work on and just help get them more trust and get them more business at the end of the day. I mean, that's what we're all here for. So
Absolutely. And you know, I love that piece in terms of the consistency, because I think it's very easy as well to get lost in the noise in the online space. Very, very easy. And I think when people build a brand and they work on their branding, whether they do it themselves or whether they employ someone else to do it for them, but first of all, I always think it should represent you. You know, I know you touched on that earlier in terms of, you know, when you see a dusky pink post, you know it's going to be me. But obviously it represents me, that, you know, and I know it's not just about colors and fonts at all, but there's so much to branding and we want it to be consistent. And from day one, I have used the same colors, the same fonts. I've represented myself in the same way. My pictures, everything is just very, very unique and very, very British, but very much me, representing me. And I think that consistency has really supported and helped me in terms of my business, because people know automatically that's a Kayleigh post, or that's clearly got to be, actually I can. So I love that consistency. And I think it is really easy to get lost in that noise. But I think for all of our listeners as well, if you're struggling with your branding and you're not quite sure, you know, which direction to go, etc., go and ask for some support, you know, absolutely reach out to Charlotte and ask for some support in terms of, you know, your representations and to try and keep that consistency, because as you've just said, you know, it really does help build that trust and it builds that reputation at the end of the day as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I'm always around in the DMs, you know, if someone just has a question about anything to do with their branding, I'm always around to answer. So
amazing.
Yeah, I love having a chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And what would you say then? So in terms of our female entrepreneurs listening, and how can they, how can their brand evolve with their business, for example, and what are the sales benefits of staying adaptable? Because that's one thing, we're talking about being consistent, but as we know, businesses develop and evolve, and then therefore potentially so can their brands. So what could you say about that?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think there's ways that you can go about this to kind of ensure that as your business evolves, that it still resonates with you. But essentially, as you grow and develop, there might be a reason that you need to rebrand and adapt to what you're offering. So, for example, if you're adding additional services to your business, or perhaps your values might have changed, you might have gone and had children, you've got different values. So knowing when it's time to rebrand is essential to staying adaptable and generating sales, because if your branding no longer resonates with your goals or what your business is trying to achieve, then you'll have a harder time trying to attract your ideal clients. So, even your ideal client, for example, might even change as you evolve. So this could be another reason why you'd need to adapt or evolve your branding. But what I would say is that even if you are going through a rebrand, this doesn't mean that you lose your core values or the true essence of your business. You can still pull elements from your current brand and just reframe it in a new version that resonates with your values as they are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this. And I think, I think that's great advice as well, because there are people that are potentially going through, adapting their programs, their product suites, adapting, maybe even their entire business name and things like that. And I think as you start to grow your business, or as you start to adapt your business, your brand needs to adapt with it and needs to go, coincide with that. So, I really appreciate that advice you're giving our listeners there. So if you are in a stage of your business that you're starting to evolve, or you're starting to adapt your business, then obviously really make sure that your brand is supporting that as well. What would you say then? So in terms of our listeners, and obviously there are many female entrepreneurs listening to this podcast episode, all at different stages of their journey. What would be your biggest piece of advice for our listeners based on branding?
Oh, my biggest piece of advice. Love this question. So a lot of this answer actually comes down to a lot of things, not just with your branding, but I'd say that the first thing that you kind of need to focus on is really getting to know your ideal client, because once you have a clearer vision of this, you'll have a better understanding as to how your brand should look in order to attract them and obviously get more business, get more sales. So I'd also say that you would need to break your brand identity down into elements and look at your goals, look at your fonts, look at your colors, and just check, are they aligned with where you're at now? Because if they're not, then the chances are you're going to switch things up a little bit just to make sure that they are. And then the final piece of advice that I'd probably give to everyone is obviously consistency. However you choose to look in the end, whatever colors, fonts, brand messaging, what photos, types, styles of photos, props, whatever you choose to look like, just stick with this and remain consistent, because that will enable people to trust you and recognize you. And as I say, even without searching your name or seeing your name, seeing your photo, they'll know that it's you just because of your branding.
Yeah. Amazing. So consistency is key, 100%. Consistency is so important for every aspect of business, isn't it? So keeping 100%. That consistency, is so important. Amazing advice. So we're coming towards the end of the episode, and I always ask all of my guests this one question. So just to finish off, what is your one word of the year and why?
Ooh. Yeah, I did have a think about this the other day. So my one word for 2024 is build. And the reason why my word is build is because I'm currently just working on getting all elements of my business put together and built, just so that I can create a business for the future that's, going to last me a long time. And yeah, I'm just trying to set up all the systems that I need in order to get everything ready at the moment. So yeah. Loving it.
Amazing. I love that word build. We haven't had that one actually on the episodes so far this year. So incredible. I always love asking people's words and knowing their why, because it focuses us, doesn't it, at the beginning of the year, and it really allows us to, to stay focused on that specific thing. So build. Love that. Charlotte, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode. Where can our listeners find you and connect with you?
Oh, thank you. It's been so nice to come on. So everyone that's listening, feel free to connect with me. I'm mainly over on Instagram. That's my kind of main hangout. So you can find me at Refine Design Ltd. Yeah, just drop me a follow, drop me a DM. I'm always happy to have a chat, as we said. And yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone.
Amazing. Go and give Charlotte a follow. She's absolutely incredible at what she does as a designer, as well as a social media manager. And she will, of course, have her DMs open for any of you that want some advice around branding. Charlotte, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much to everyone that has tuned into today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And I will see you all again next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur Podcast with me, your host, Kayleigh Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow, and scale your dream six-figure or multi-six-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.